Hi everyone and welcome to my English vlog. My name is Melissa. I study in Tech Millennial and today I'll be talking about the Cold War. The Cold War rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union lasted for decades and resulted in anti-communist suspicions and international incidents that led the two superpowers to the brink of nuclear disaster. The first one is Berlin Airlift. In June 1948, the US and Britain announced a proposal for establishing a new currency, the Deutschmark, into West Berlin. This was very important to the Cold War, where there is no direct fighting. It is things like this that decide who wins and who loses. This was a huge win for the US and put many countries on our side. The second one is U-2 incident. On May 1st, 1960, the Soviet Union shut down a US U-2 reconnaissance plane and called the Flight and Aggressive Act. Because of this event, tensions between the Soviet Union and the US continued to climb. Cuban Missile Crisis. On October 14, 1962, a U-2 spy plane flying over Cuba discovered nuclear missile sites under construction. These missiles would have been capable of quickly reaching the United States. This would have become the most damaging hot wars the world ever saw, so that is why it is extremely important to understand the Cold War. Vietnam War. On April 30, 1975, the last American troops left Vietnam by helicopter of the communist soldiers of the North marching to Saigon. This war was key to the idea of Cold War because the US and Soviets helped the opposing sides but didn't have to wage hot war on each other. Soviet-Afghanistan War. The Soviet war in Afghanistan lasted 9 years from December 1979 to February 1989. It was fought between Soviet-led Afghanistan forces against multinational rebel groups called the Mujahideens. This, like the Vietnam War, is another example of a proxy war. These are important to the Cold War because that is how the US and Soviets clash. Korean War. Korea was occupied by Japan until the end of World War II. After the end of the war, Korea was divided by the US to the south and Russia and China to the north, similar to what happened in Germany. This war is one of the most important, even though it is often forgotten. Sputnik Crisis. The Sputnik Crisis was the American reaction to the success of the Sputnik program. It was a key Cold War event that began on October 4, 1957, when the Soviet Union launched the Sputnik 1, the first artificial Earth satellite. Non-Proliferation Treaty is an international treaty whose objective is to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons and weapons technology, to promote cooperation in the peaceful uses of the nuclear energy, and to further the goal of achieving nuclear disarmament. On 11 May 1995, the treaty was extended indefinitely. Berlin Wall falls. The Berlin Wall was a symbol throughout the whole Cold War, representing the war itself and communism. The falling of the wall symbolized the end of the Cold War and the end of the Iron Curtain's dominance. This was important to the Cold War because it signaled the end. The Cold War was a rivalry after the World War II between the Soviet Union and its satellites and the democratic countries of the Western world under the leadership of the United States. Capitalism is an economic system in which private individuals or businesses own capital goods. The production of goods and services is based on supply and demand in the general market, known as market economy, rather than through central planning, known as a planned economy or command economy. It was Adam Smith who noticed that mercantilism was not a force of development, and changed, but a regressive system that was creating trade imbalances between nations and keeping them from advancing. His ideas for a free market opened the world to capitalism. The term socialism has been applied to very different economic and political systems throughout history. Under a true socialist system, it's the government's role to determine output and pricing levels. The challenge is synchronizing these decisions with the needs of consumers. The intellectual roots of socialism go back at least as far as ancient Greek times, when the philosopher Plato depicted a type of collective society in his dialogue. It was Karl Marx, undoubtedly the most influential theorist of socialism, who called Owen Fourier and other early socialist thinkers utopians and dismissed their visions as dreamy and unrealistic. Today, I'll be interviewing my cousin, Sebastian Hernandez. He's 21 years old and he will tell me about his investigation of the Cold War. What countries were the world leaders during this period?
Soviet Union, USA, Denmark, Russia, Canada, Albany, and Belgium.
Why did countries who were allies during the wars became enemies afterwards?
They became enemies after the World War, but to be precise, thought they were allies during the war, but common mistrust was still there, and Stalin alleged that the West, particularly the British and the USA, were not helping the Soviet Union much when it was fighting Germany. The mistrust was also seen during the Casablanca Conference.
Where did the Cold War take place?
It took place in Latin America, South America, Cuba, Vietnam, Greece, Europe, USA, Soviet Union, and Oriental Asia.
What opinion did the general public have of the Cold War?
The concept of the ideological ideas influencing the number of lives taken by this war were impossible to ignore by the conflicts of these two sides, capitalism and communism.
What type of weapons did the two world powers have at their disposal?
Chieftain main battle tank, FN-8 Folk battle rifle, F4 Phantom, AK-47.
My conclusion about the Cold War is that the United States ended up being the only remaining superpower, and hopes for a safer world faded as global problems challenged American foreign policy, setting a new course for the United States. In my opinion, both capitalism and socialism have their high and low points, but in the end, capitalism is by far the better way to run an economy. It is impossible to not notice that some of the most powerful countries in the world have capitalistic economies, and that through these they thrive and prosper.